Farming's like many other businesses. It goes through long-term boom and bust cycles, but when it's in protracted bust cycles, it's often compared to the 1980s. And you're now seeing that referenced on many different YouTube channels and news outlets. But are we actually in a 1980s style farm crisis? Well, using Google AI to scour the internet, according to that source, yes, we are in a long-term farm crisis very similar to the 1980s. A farm crisis is depicted by a long-term downturn in ag prices, which guts out the Midwest and leaves farmers relying upon government help. Ironic, considering the government is probably who got you in the mess in the first place. So in this video, if you will bear with me and take your time to watch, I'm going to compare the 1980s to current prices, showing charts, and I will paint the broad scope picture of what I think will happen going forward and show you as to why I think that. Brownfield News reports ag economist U.S. soybean prices to remain under pressure. Yeah, no shit. An ag economist at Ohio State University says soybean prices could continue to be impacted this year by Brazil. Huh. Haven't they been for like the last 30 years? Even with reduced tariffs at 13% from China, which is still well over $1 a bushel, making soybeans less competitive in Brazil, they're going to have higher prices of U.S. soybeans going into China, and that's putting downward pressure. Well, it's because of global markets. Southeast Indiana farmer Mike Coney says $30.88 an acre from the Bridge Assistance Program isn't going to help offset production losses. Well, that's because it's $30.88 per acre. Why are they not paying us about $2 to $3 per bushel raised? Just turn in your bushels and add a couple bucks to them. And on your crop insurance price, when that was established, add a couple bucks to it. So if you had a crop insurance claim, you should have got a couple more dollars from the set price. So if your set price was 10, it should have been 12. They're fucking us. That's all it comes down to. They're giving you pennies on the dollar for the amount of losses that were created. These are long-term business cycles, and you can see the gray bars are recessions in the business cycle. So usually what happens is you have a business cycle, meaning you have like a deflationary growth period. The economy's kind of good for a while, then things start getting slower and slower and slower, and falls into a recession. Then they print a lot of money, and usually end up with a big spike, and things start slowing down again. If you listen to my podcast, I referenced the Peter Schiff show, calls it the heroin addict. And it's kind of like you shoot up and you have this big spike. You crash, so you shoot up, then you have a big, you start to, your high wears off, and you start to get tired, and you crash again, and you shoot up again. And that's how he kind of analyzes it. It's kind of a funny analogy. But anyway, if you look at this chart, you can see 1990 through 2002. So you saw, it was a recession around 88 or 90, recession, and you saw another recession. And again, you saw, federal funds rates drop, and farming started doing a little better during this time. Out the gate, farming does good. Slowly, everything starts to decline again. And, we saw another rise and starts to decline again. And we, of course, went broke in 08. But every 5 to 8 years, there's always bubble cycles. The last one began in 2020, so we should be good with another spike here. Should be good to go with another round of injections. Again, about that 2030, 2032 time frame. Maybe 2029, somewhere in there, coming up next probably 3 years to maybe 5 years. We'll see another upward cycle again. I also wanted to point out while I had this chart open, so here'd be about your 71 currency devaluation about time of recession. Look at this, like these business cycles. There's always up and down to a business cycle. Look at this, was a big uptrend. Then we got around 80, 81 at peak inflation, and we're at the fiat system here. But it's been down ever since. And to me, that's just a a major decline in America's turning point. We went on the fiat system and came out of the gates hot, and we've just been on a long-term down pattern ever since. Whereas, prior to back here on the gold standard, you look at this, those things were, they had ups and downs, but it's really a much more stable pattern than just a peak and then just a long-term decline. So yeah, we'll have another peak, but back on macro trends, looking at the long-term corn prices, kind of mapping a general trajectory of price averaging on a long-term inflation adjustment. Again, the main inflation adjustments come at times of currency devaluation, which I will highlight here in a second, but the long-term trajectory, and we can see it there gauged every 5 years, so we can gauge a rough distance, which the next would be about 2030, right in there, and we can see that probably we're going to end up right around $5 being here, around the 2030 mark being right there. So that's kind of looking to me like right in about here. You're going to see a little closer to your $5 mark, or possibly a currency devaluation occurring out in, say, here. And if we see every so often that we devalue currency, we're probably looking at something like this, for prices. Could be up here, so somewhere in this rough area. And we'll meet up about in this circle, which is about 2031. And I think we'll start to rise from there. And when you get to that high, you're towards the upper end of this trading range, so I'm guessing there should be some sort of currency devaluation occur around 2032, somewhere in that area, 2033, and that would be 08 to 2033, or 71 to 08, about 40 years. 08 in about 30 years, so it's about right on par. We can see if soybeans paint the same picture, and you can clearly see the currency devaluation of 71, which shot prices straight up. And you can see a dead sideways trading range at that time period, literally just straight across the page. And obviously since then we've had a incline price range, except for right now. You can see that this chart has not kept up pace with the highs. It's went up then plateaued. So are we going to go something like this, or are we going to see more like this? Are we going this way, or are we going this way? Question mark. The Dow Jones stock market has kind of an opposite reaction, which around 71 would be more like in here, where it pretty much traded sideways to down for 10 years, while the grains trended up. Then about the time where the grains really started to peak and go over the edge, around 80, 81, you can see where it ended up here until the late 99 dot-com bubble, which the dot-com bubble and bust, which was a good time for grains, lasted about 2000 to 2012, somewhere right in there. And you can see again we traded into a more sideways level, and then right around the time the dollar strengthened and started going up around that 2% federal mandate, 2% federal inflation mandate. That was the time when the dollar rallied, and you can see when that started to go up, we just went up again. But sideways up, kind of looks to me like we're about ready for a sideways pattern again. And that would be on par for about where that corn chart starts to intersect and starts to rise. I'm sure a lot of you guys follow this guy's channel, and while I personally don't follow him, this was brought to my attention, whereas Mr. Tony Reed, who's quite sensationally hilarious on TikTok, but brain damaged when it comes to supply and demand, writes a post about how the solar and wind are not cutting it. This was in reference to the large storm system around the 24th of January here, as pushing our electrical grid to the maximum. Now, Tony, just like many other dumb fucks on the internet, seems to think that solar and wind are the root cause problem, and have completely overlooked the fact that the demand is far outpacing our grid. But that's probably why you don't see Tony putting out videos like these that actually have any information behind them. He just puts out a bunch of social media stupidity with a lot of profanity on it. And because this is social media, filled with complete ignorance and hate, I'm sure that somebody will think that I'm trying to start a turf war with this man, which I'm not. I'm just simply showing how the larger creators that have a lot of followers often produce a lot of misinformation, which is what I was really hoping to clear up on this channel. Now, if I were to want to start a turf war with this guy, you would just simply tell somebody to go Google the sale bill for the guy that he worked for, and that would clear up all the questions of why he's now currently running old equipment and has no acres. But back to topic at hand, discussing supply and demand. It's really not production, it's the grid system. This chart here is long-term crude oil production, United States. And you can see on this chart, and I've already shown this chart in other videos, so if you've seen this part, it's redundant. But you can see again how we went through a long-term decline phase, which until hydraulic fracturing came along, and here we were down. Here comes hydraulic fracturing, and we go up in production. I think we're topped. Many other experts think we're topped. I think we start to look like something like right in here, with time a longer term down pattern, at the time of rising demand. Now that's just oil. But oil is a form of energy, and the topic at hand was electricity. What you're going to see, like on this map, is data centers that are going to be expanding, coming across the entire Midwest. Why are they in the Midwest? Well, they typically follow areas where solar and wind are at. Why are they following areas where solar and wind are at? Well, that's where the cheapest electricity rates are. Now, for the people that are bitching on the internet about, oh, my bills have went up since solar and wind have came in. Well, your bill would have quadrupled had that not come in. Demand is far outpacing the supply. And when demand outpaces supply, price goes up. Now, what many people don't understand is a lot of energy generation are actually different companies than some of the grid. It can be integrated, it cannot be integrated. There are companies that produce power, electricity, and they buy space on essentially a highway. They buy the line space. Well, when you start having a lot of supply or a lot of jammed into a small highway, you clog up the road. And one of the biggest problems we have in the United States right now is we have not expanded our electrical highway enough to handle even the increased production that we have. Now, production has just barely kept up. And with Trump changing the solar and wind credits, you're probably going to see a drop-off at a time of rising demand. So these brownouts and things that are being complained about will actually grow. They'll get worse. Solar and wind can be deployed very rapidly, whereas nuclear takes multiple years to become established. This is a long-term soybean price chart. A lot of people right now are talking about the similarities to the 80s. While I tend to agree with that myself, probably would lean more towards it's more like the 90s than the 80s. And you can see the 90s started there and ended right in here. And you can see a sideways pattern, a mid-90s spike, and a return to a sideways pattern, which is where the dot-com bubble blew up, and then obviously we started just taking off as the currency got reset right in here at this big spike. And this forms your sideways trading pattern, and we stair-stepped up into a new sideways trading pattern at the time of currency devaluation. And if you follow this channel regularly, you have seen me talk about the stair steps, where you go on the step up, just like steps in your house, step up, step up. So the pattern is really lining up from here to here, and you can see that in a sideways, a spike up, and then a sideways. And that probably means that it'll go along about like this, and then we will see something happen. 2026 preliminary USDA outlook for break-even prices puts corn at 503 and soybeans at 1280 per bushel. This chart right here would be about 14 to 2020. You see I'm moving nicely sideways. And right here where I circled, we just notch straight down, but then continue sideways. Well, we would have continued sideways up here. We notched down, meaning we discounted just for the tariffs. This right here's downtrend was the tariffs. This was under Trump's first term. Now over here on the right side, we are back in a sideways pattern, much like we saw from this time frame. So it appears that we're stuck back into a 2014 and 2019 style pattern, but only inflation adjusted from the notched down prices. Now, as I just said in the video, the USDA is predicting about $12.80. Now, this was in the $10 range. We would have continued, and then we're back into the $10 range. This is the $8.50 range. Inflation adjusted, which the government says we have about 30% inflation. So we're right here. So the problem is we should be right here in the $12 range, but we've never recovered because we're still under the discounted rate from tariffs. Now here's why I don't think we're quite in the 80s. I think we're looking at something more like the 90s. You can see from the 90s that we had a sideways pattern, and we had a mid-90s spike in price, and we came off that spike to return to a sideways pattern, only to go into the dot-com bubble burst in this vicinity, and we obviously went upwards until the major currency reset of 08, which occurred at this big spike. And if you overlay these, we are very similar, very close. Hold up the screen here so you can see how we had a sideways pattern, a spike, return to a sideways pattern, and then obviously from there, right here, we went up in that 08 disaster currency reset, which is further proof. I just think that our current sideways pattern is going to end up petering out something more like the 90s. I think we're very similar to 90s here. We went through 14 to 19, which would be like the early 90s. Then we end up going into a spike like the mid, about 95 through about 97 or 8. And then we ended up in that 98 through about 2000 time frame. It's about what we're in right now. And I really think we're going to go into that 01, 02 time frame pretty soon, with the currency devaluation maybe coming a little sooner than what 08 would be. I'm going to say 2033, somewhere in there. So I think that if you look at this chart on the computer, like I say, this early 90s would be 14 to 19. This would be where we are now. That lasted about 4 years. So we should be starting to get to the end of it here pretty soon. We started a long-term journey as the dollar began long-term decline. And I think that we're going to be looking at something like this again, with the exception that it may not be as good as last time because our dollar's remaining higher and our trade relations have been significantly hurt. But at least you might go like up like this and then level out or something. But I do think we will see some higher prices coming in the future. And one of the reasons I think we'll see those higher prices is because many of the things of Donald Trump's energy policies will be creating energy shortages going forward. So I think the push for things like SAF, biofuels and stuff like that will become a bigger picture item going into the future. I think that there will be a push for those things. So that's where I'm driving my conclusions and why I think we're in something more like the 90s versus the 80s. This is a long-term crude oil price chart, and as we begin that long-term decline, as I showed earlier, that would show up right in here. Then the price really elevated thereafter, especially right in about here, the late 90s, right in about the time we got demand started skyrocketing. We got into that 9/11 deal, and it really spiked right in there. But I think we see something similar again, which could actually be made worse if we end up in Iran. We'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But the similarities are there, more so than the 80s. For the time being, obviously, agriculture is very suppressed and not very good. So I don't know. There's going to be a lot of farm bankruptcies going forward. It's not good. I think the next couple of years is going to shake a lot of people out. And on the backside of that, you'll have a lot of consolidation. And, so we're definitely in a heavy bust cycle longer term. So I think it's coming. It's not gonna be tomorrow. I mean, probably 2028 at the earliest. So if you guys can hang on until then, and probably better times ahead. But man, this is 5, 6, maybe even 7 years of almost operating at losses. It's gonna be rough. And then if you work at 10 good years to recover just those losses, well, did you really? I mean, if you work a job 5 years and make money, and you go to work for free for the next 5, and you lost all that money you made, I mean, did you really ever make anything? It's going to be a burning question on a lot of people's minds going forward. So, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys learned something, and appreciate the viewership. Oh, and also, those rolling brownouts, yeah, they're going to get worse. They're going to get worse. And when you're doing energy policies as they're currently doing out of the White House right now, it'll get worse rapidly. So expect this to become the normal.